Here are the 10 things you must know when it comes to accepting orders on DoorDash. For those of you who don't know, knowing what orders to accept versus what orders you should decline plays a huge role in the amount of money you can make as a DoorDash driver. This is why the better you know your market, the more potential money there is to make. Let me put things into perspective for you. When I was a brand new Dasher, I thought anything above $15 an hour was really good. Now I average about $25 an hour just from knowing the strategy of accepting the right orders at the right time to the right restaurants. So hopefully after watching this video, you can apply these 10 things to your dashing and hopefully increase your pay just like I did. With that being said, let's get into it. The first thing you have to know is what day of the week it is. This plays a huge role into what orders you should be accepting and what orders you shouldn't be accepting. Because take Tuesday for instance. If it's a Tuesday, I'm gonna be much more lenient on what orders I'm accepting because I know that there's not gonna be a lot of high paying orders and it's not gonna be that busy. So I might as well accept some so-so orders like maybe $1 per mile orders, maybe some that I wouldn't normally take, because I just want to keep myself busy on the slow days, because that's the best way to make the most amount of money that I've found on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Now on Saturdays and Sundays, I'm obviously going to be more selective. I usually like to accept orders that are $1.50 per mile or even higher, and I do decline a lot more orders on the weekends because I know that there's going to be good orders flowing in consistently regardless of the time of day, which actually leads perfectly into the second thing, which is time of day. The different times of day really dictate which orders I'm accepting, which ones I'm declining. You see, if it's morning time, if it's like 8:30 in the morning, I'm gonna be pretty much taking what I can get. Or you could even go earlier, like say it's 7 o'clock. I'm basically accepting whatever DoorDash gives me. Obviously, if it's a really bad order, I'm not gonna take it. If it's like a no-tip order, not taking it. But in the morning time, I do take orders that I normally wouldn't take just because it's not as busy. It's kind of the same thing as when it comes to the day of the week. When it's the slow times of day, you aren't gonna wanna be super selective because you could just sit there declining and then all of a sudden you're waiting 5 to 10 minutes just to get your next order. So these two kind of go hand in hand. Just be less selective when it comes to what orders you're accepting during slow days and during slow times. But during the dinner time, obviously I'm going to be more selective. I'm going to decline orders that are $1 per mile. I'm going to wait for high payouts, low mileage, just because I know that there's more orders like that going around. The next thing you need to look at when it comes to accepting orders is if there's peak pay. Peak pay changes a lot because when there's peak pay, there's no way you should be accepting anything that's $1 per mile because normally that means it would be a really bad order. So when peak pay comes into play, you can definitely be more selective like I've been talking about throughout this whole video. You can definitely be more selective when it comes to peak pay because you know that there's really high paying orders out there, and when there's peak pay, it usually means it's really busy, so the orders should be flowing in unless you get unlucky and that means that there's a bunch of dashers on the road, which means it could be slower. But in the case of peak pay, you should be extra selective with your orders. So that's kind of the basis of what you need to think about right off the bat. You need to think about this as you're starting your shift. You need to think, okay, what time of day is it? What day of the week is it? And is there any peak pay? And that'll give you the foundation for kind of your general idea of what dollar per mile ratio you're gonna be looking at, which leads us to number 4, which is pay attention to dollar per mile ratio. This is the first thing that I look at when I get an order. So once I have that foundation set with the first 3 things I mentioned, then I'm starting my dash, I know what my game plan is, and then I get my first order and I look at, okay, so I have this order, it's $6, it's going 3 miles, okay, I'm definitely gonna take that. But if I got an order like $5 for 5 miles, then I think, okay, oh, it's a Tuesday and it's 10 o'clock in the morning. I'll accept it, or whatever it is. But if this is a Saturday night, I get that order and I'm like, no way. I would never accept that on a Saturday night. So the first thing you look at is that dollar per mile ratio, because that's pretty much the number one thing that matters when it comes to what orders you need to accept. But there are so many other factors that come into play, and you can't just rely on dollar per mile ratio. So that leads us into number 5, which is what miles are freeway miles versus which miles are street miles. This is a huge factor because not only does dollar per mile ratio matter, but it matters how fast you can get the orders done. Because if an order is 1 mile away, but that 1 mile is loaded with traffic and it's going to take you 10 minutes just to go that 1 mile, then that might not be an order you should accept. But if there's an order that's 8 miles away for, let's say, $10, and you might be thinking, well, maybe I don't want to take it, it's a Saturday night, but then you see, oh, that 8 miles is all freeway miles, I might as well take it. So that plays a big factor into things as well, especially because on Saturday and Sunday, there's not going to be as much traffic because there's just less traffic during the weekend anyway. And so this is something you need to keep in mind when you're deciding which orders you should accept. Now on to number 6, which is delivery location. This is a really important one because when it comes to delivery location, this could make or break an order. If I notice that an order is taking me out of my zone, it's almost an automatic decline unless the payout is really good. So also another thing that has to do with delivery location is sometimes deliveries can lead you right into a great area that has a bunch of restaurants around it. That's usually a good order to take if all the other things check out. So that's something to pay attention to, and sometimes you can catch if it's an apartment order once you know your area extremely well, which definitely comes in handy because I try to keep the apartment orders to a minimum because they just take longer. So just a quick recap, the first things you're going to want to do is remember what day of the week, what time of day it is, and if there's peak pay. And then when you get that order, make sure you look at that dollar per mile ratio, see what miles are freeway versus street miles, and then make sure you look at that delivery location because that's going to tell you a lot about if this order is a good order to accept. Now on to number 7, what restaurant it is. I honestly could say this one might be the most important. I personally feel like dollar per mile ratio probably is, but restaurant plays a huge role in what orders are good and which orders aren't, because let me tell you, if there's an order that's $10 for 7 miles and it's a Wendy's, it's probably still a decline for me. Now, if I get that to Chick-fil-A, I'm gonna take it. Chick-fil-A in my area is the absolute best. They have the orders ready right when I get there, 95% of the time. It is such a rarity that I even have to wait over a minute when it comes to Chick-fil-A. So that's what I'm talking about when it comes to restaurant. Wendy's is a good example of what restaurants to avoid. If you guys want to know what restaurants I highly avoid, you can check out the video I did where I go over the 5 restaurants I avoid at all costs. But let me just tell you, Wendy's was at the top of that list. So that's what I mean by making sure you know which restaurants are good, which ones are quick, and which ones you should steer clear of unless the payout is just absurd. Like obviously if I got an order to Wendy's that's $15 for 5 miles, I'm gonna accept it because then I'm willing to wait like 10 or 15 minutes for it. But other than that, no. So once you've done all those things, the next step you should do is think to yourself, is that a restaurant where the lobby is open or is that lobby normally closed? Because let me tell you, if you show up to a place and the lobby's closed, it just adds on a couple extra minutes, regardless of if there's a short drive-through line. So this will just come with practice. This will just come with knowing your market, knowing which lobbies are open, which lobbies are closed, but that's definitely something to keep in mind when deciding what orders to accept. Now, number 9 is kind of just like a bonus. It doesn't really play a big factor with me at all, but it does affect the dollar per mile ratios that I use. And this would be if the order is a stack order or a red card order. With these orders, I usually make sure that they're a higher dollar per mile ratio than normal orders, especially because stack orders, you have to go to multiple restaurants. And with red card orders, you're going to be spending time inside that place shopping for a little bit. So you want to take that into account and make sure you aren't following the same rules as you are for normal orders, as you are for stack orders and red card orders. And lastly, number 10 is kind of just one that I personally do. Other people have different strategies, but the last thing I do is think, what is my acceptance rate? If my acceptance rate is in the 80%, then I can be more selective because I like to keep my top dasher status because it really comes in handy in my area. So if I'm at like 68% or 50% even, then I'm gonna be less selective because I wanna accept more orders, get that acceptance rate up. But if it's over 70%, then I don't worry too much. Then I just go through as normal with the other 9 tips I just gave you. But when worst comes to worst and it's like the last day of the month and my acceptance rate's at like 60%, you know I'm taking almost every single order to try and bump that up. But anyways, there you guys have it. Hopefully you can take some of these tips and apply it to your dashing and start making more money. Maybe you have it all figured out and you just watch this for entertainment. And if you did that, thank you so much. Make sure you guys subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and I'll see you guys next time.